All right, let's jump right in. Today we're doing a deep dive on Peter Attia's Outlive. And let me tell you, this book, it's not your typical health book.
No, not at all. It really digs into the science of longevity.
And it really challenges a lot of conventional thinking about aging.
Yeah, like Attia says, it's not just about adding years to your life, it's about adding life to those years.
Exactly. And one of the most fascinating concepts in the book is this idea of becoming an athlete of life.
Right. Training for what he calls a centenarian decathlon, picking 10 physical things you want to be able to do when you're 100.
I love that. So what kind of things are we talking about here? Give us some examples.
Well, he talks about things like being able to get up off the floor easily, climb a flight of stairs without getting winded, everyday things that become more challenging as we age.
Okay, so it's not about running marathons or bench pressing your body weight. It's about functional fitness, the kind that lets you live independently and enjoy life to the fullest.
Exactly. And one of the key strategies Attia emphasizes for achieving this is Zone 2 cardio.
Okay, zone 2 cardio. I'll be honest, the first time I heard that term, I was a little intimidated.
Yeah, it sounds kind of technical, but it's actually pretty simple. It's basically moderate intensity exercise that you can sustain for longer periods.
So like what, brisk walking, light jogging, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And the key is to find that sweet spot where your heart rate is about 60 to 70% of its maximum.
So you should be able to hold a conversation while you're doing it, but maybe not sing a power ballad.
Haha, right. And Attia argues that this Zone 2 training is so crucial because it helps your body burn fat more efficiently.
So it's not just about burning calories, it's about training your metabolism at a cellular level.
Exactly. And that has all sorts of benefits for longevity beyond just weight management.
Fascinating. So we've got cardio covered. What about strength training? Is that important for longevity too?
Absolutely. Attia is a huge advocate for strength training at all ages,
Even as we get older.
especially as we get older,
Hmm.
because muscle mass and bone density naturally decline with age, which can make us more prone to frailty and falls.
Yeah, that makes sense. So strength training helps counteract that decline.
Exactly. It helps you stay strong, independent, and resilient as you age.
And Attia doesn't just recommend hitting the gym and lifting weights. He suggests some pretty unconventional exercises too, like farmer's carries.
Right. Where you walk while carrying heavy weights.
And even dead hangs, literally hanging from a bar.
It might sound strange, but it's all about building functional strength, the kind that helps you with everyday activities.
I'm starting to see a theme here. It's all about preparing your body for the long haul, for a life that's active and vibrant well into your later years.
That's exactly it. And speaking of preparing for the long haul, we can't ignore the role of diet.
Right, because Attia doesn't mince words when it comes to the standard American diet. He basically calls it a recipe for premature aging.
Yeah, he's pretty blunt about the negative impacts of the SAD diet. He points out that it's loaded with processed foods, sugar, and unhealthy fats, which can contribute to inflammation, insulin resistance, and all sorts of chronic diseases.
So what does he recommend instead?
Well, he explores a few different approaches, like caloric restriction.
Which has shown some promising results in animal studies, but it can be pretty hard to maintain long term.
Yeah, it's not for everyone. He also talks about dietary restriction, where you focus on limiting specific nutrients.
And time restriction, like intermittent fasting.
Right, which has gained a lot of popularity in recent years.
But one thing that really stood out to me was his emphasis on protein.
Yeah, he recommends getting at least 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight daily.
Wow, that's a lot. More than most people probably consume.
Yeah, and he even suggests specific sources, like whey protein isolate.
Which is interesting because it suggests he's targeting a specific metabolic effect, not just general nutrition.
Exactly. And he also stresses the importance of healthy fats, particularly omega-3 fatty acids, which are found in fatty fish, nuts, and seeds.
While cutting back on those detrimental omega-6s, which are abundant in processed foods and certain vegetable oils.
Right. It's all about making informed choices and prioritizing the nutrients that support longevity.
Okay, we've talked about exercise and diet. Now let's move on to another crucial pillar of health.
Sleep.
Yes, sleep. The often neglected but absolutely essential ingredient for a long and healthy life.
And Attia shares a pretty powerful personal story about how sleep deprivation nearly cost him his life.
Yeah, he literally fell asleep at the wheel after going without sleep for 60 hours. It was a wake-up call, literally, about the importance of sleep.
Wow, that's scary. And it really underscores how crucial sleep is not just for our energy levels, but for our overall health and well-being.
Absolutely. And Attia delves into the science, explaining how lack of sleep increases the risk of everything from heart disease and diabetes to accidents and cognitive decline.
So it's not just about feeling tired, it's about the impact on our physical and mental health,
Exactly. And he recommends aiming for 7.5 to 8.5 hours of sleep each night.
which is more than many people get, especially in our fast-paced, always-on culture.
Right. And he emphasizes the importance of quality sleep too, not just the quantity. So no tossing and turning for hours on end. We need that deep restorative sleep that allows our bodies and minds to fully recharge.
Absolutely. And he offers some practical tips for improving sleep quality, like reducing blue light exposure before bed, keeping your bedroom cool and dark, and establishing a regular sleep schedule.
It's about creating an environment that's conducive to sleep and setting yourself up for success.
Exactly. And speaking of success, Attia doesn't just focus on the physical aspects of longevity. He also emphasizes the importance of emotional well-being.
That's so important because our mental and emotional state plays a huge role in our overall health and longevity.
Absolutely. Attia argues that neglecting your emotional health can sabotage even the best physical efforts.
Like, you could be eating all the right foods and exercising regularly, but if you're chronically stressed and unhappy, it's going to take a toll on your health.
Exactly. And he digs into the science, explaining how chronic stress, anxiety, and negativity can accelerate aging on a physiological level.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about how our emotional state literally impacts our cells and our overall health.
Precisely. And this is where Attia's approach gets really practical. He suggests specific strategies for managing stress and improving emotional well-being, like meditation and mindfulness practices.
Yeah, those could be incredibly powerful tools for calming the mind, reducing stress, and cultivating a sense of inner peace.
Exactly. And he also explores the potential of psychedelics in treating conditions like depression and anxiety.
That's an area that's gaining a lot of attention lately, and it's certainly intriguing, but it's also important to approach it with caution and under the guidance of a qualified professional.
Absolutely. It's not a quick fix or a one-size-fits-all solution, but the research is definitely promising, and it's definitely an area worth exploring further.
So it seems like Adia is advocating for a more holistic and individualized approach to longevity, considering all aspects of our being, not just the physical.
Absolutely. He encourages readers to experiment, try different approaches, and discover what works best for their individual needs and goals.
So there's no one-size-fits-all formula for longevity. It's about taking ownership of your health and well-being and becoming the architect of your own aging process.
And that includes being proactive, seeking out information, and staying informed about the latest advancements in longevity science.
Which brings us to a really exciting part of the book, Adia's exploration of the cutting-edge science and technology that could radically extend our lifespans.
He delves into areas like gene editing, stem cell therapy, and even the development of drugs that could target the underlying mechanisms of aging. We're talking about potentially slowing down or even reversing the aging process. I mean, it's pretty mind-blowing stuff. And
Yeah.
what I find really interesting is he doesn't present it as this like far-off sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah.
He really grounds it in the reality of the research that's happening right now in labs all over the world.
And he does a great job of making it understandable, even if you don't have background in science.
Yeah, exactly.
But he also doesn't shy away from the ethical considerations, right? Like, if we could dramatically extend our lifespans, should we?
Right, exactly. He raises some really important questions about the potential societal impact of these technologies. Like, what would it mean for our healthcare systems, our economies, our relationships?
Yeah, these are big questions that we need to start thinking about now before these technologies become even more advanced.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that makes Outlive so compelling. It's not just about the science, it's about the bigger picture.
Right. It's about the human implications of this longevity revolution.
Hmm.
And it really forces us to confront some fundamental questions about what it means to live a long and healthy life.
Exactly. And it all circles back to that idea of personalized longevity that we were talking about earlier. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah, what works for one person might not work for another. And Adia really encourages readers to take ownership of their health and to find what works best for them.
Right, to become active participants in their own health journey.
And that includes building a strong relationship with your doctor.
Absolutely. Attia stresses the importance of open communication with your healthcare provider, asking questions, and understand the rationale behind different treatment options.
He even provides some really helpful tips for having more productive conversations with doctors, like bringing a list of questions and being prepared to discuss your health goals.
Yeah, it's about shifting from a passive role to an active one.
Becoming a savvy consumer of healthcare, essentially.
Exactly.
So let's bring it back to our listeners here. What are some key takeaways you think people should walk away with from Outlive? What are the most important things they can start doing today to embrace this philosophy?
Hmm. That's a great question. Well, I think the first step is a mental shift. Moving away from the idea that aging is this inevitable decline and starting to view it as an ongoing opportunity for growth and challenge.
I love that. So it's about reframing our mindset about aging.
Exactly. And then it's about taking action. Think back to that centenarian decathlon concept.
Hmm.
What do you want to be capable of at 100? Set those ambitious goals and then start creating a plan to achieve them.
Yeah, it's not just about adding years to your life. It's about adding life to your years.
Right. And to do that, you need to prioritize your well-being on all levels, physical, mental, and emotional.
So make time for exercise, choose nutrient-rich foods, prioritize sleep, manage stress, and nurture those meaningful connections in your life.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Oh, I like that. It's about progress, not perfection.
Right. Experiment. Find what works for you, and be open to new discoveries. The field of longevity science is constantly evolving, and what we know today might be completely different tomorrow.
So stay curious, stay engaged, and don't be afraid to challenge conventional thinking.
Exactly. And remember, it's not just about how long we live, but how well we live those years.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on another really fascinating aspect of Outlive that we haven't really talked about yet. Attia spends a good chunk of the book discussing the role of community and social connection in longevity.
Oh, yeah, that's a really important point. He makes a very compelling case for the idea that strong social bonds are not just good for our emotional well-being, but they actually have a measurable impact on our physical health and lifespan.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about actually living longer.
Exactly. He cites studies showing that people with strong social connections tend to live longer, healthier lives, and they're more resilient in the face of stress and illness.
And he even goes so far as to say that loneliness is as detrimental to our health as smoking or obesity.
Yeah, it's a really powerful statement that really highlights the importance of nurturing those connections with friends, family, and community.
And he doesn't just leave it at that. He actually provides practical advice on how to cultivate those connections.
Right, like joining social groups, volunteering, even just making an effort to connect with people you encounter in your daily life.
So it's about being intentional about building those social bonds and recognizing that they're not just a nice to have, but a crucial component of living a long and healthy life.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important message to emphasize. We often focus on the individual actions we can take to improve our health, but Adia reminds us that we're not in this alone.
Right. We're part of a larger web of connections, and nurturing those connections can have a profound impact on our well-being and longevity.
It's a reminder that living a long and healthy life isn't just about what we do for ourselves, but also about how we connect with and contribute to the world around us.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but there's still so much more to explore in this book. We were just talking about how powerful community and connection can be, right? Attia argues it's just as important as diet and exercise when it comes to living longer. But now, let's kind of shift gears a bit. Let's look ahead into the future. Because Attia doesn't stop at what we can do today. He really dives into some incredible advances that could totally change how we think about the human lifespan.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. We're not talking about some far-off sci-fi fantasy.
Right.
Ati is looking at real, actual progress happening right now in fields like gene editing, stem cell therapy, even creating drugs that could target how aging works at its core.
Okay, gotta admit, this is where I get a little geeky. We're talking about the possibility of slowing down or even reversing aging. Sounds almost too good to be true. What makes Attia's take on this stuff different?
He keeps it real. He doesn't just throw around fancy terms. He breaks down the science behind it all, explains the how and the why, and even though some of it's pretty complex, he makes it understandable, even if you don't have a science degree.
You mentioned gene editing earlier. That sounds super promising. But isn't there a risk of, unintended consequences? What does Attia say about the ethical side of all this?
He spends a good chunk of the book looking into exactly that. He knows there are potential risks and says we need to be really careful and responsible as we develop this tech. He asks, Even if we could live way longer, should we? What would it do to society, the economy? Would it make existing inequalities worse? These are questions we got to deal with now, not later.
It's a good reminder that science doesn't happen in a bubble, right? We got to think about the big picture, the good and the bad that could come from it.
For sure. And that's what I like about Attia's approach. He faces those tough questions head on. He wants us to think critically about these advances, to have real conversations about the kind of future we're making.
So we're like right on the edge of this potential longevity revolution. What are some key things our listeners should take away? What's the most important message from Outlive?
The big takeaway, I think, is empowerment. Attia reminds us that we've got more control over our health and lifespan than we realize. We can make choices today that will affect how we age, and we can stay informed and involved as all this amazing progress happens.
So it's about taking charge of our health,
Yeah.
always learning and looking at aging with like curiosity and hope.
And not forgetting that longevity isn't about just adding years, but adding life to those years. It's about living with purpose, passion, really being alive.
I love that. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Outlive by Peter Attia. It's a book that challenges how we think, gets those important conversations going, and ultimately gives us the power to shape our own health and how long we live.
It's an invitation to rethink aging, see the possibilities, and work towards a future where we don't just live longer, but live better.